How's it going, everybody? This is Cameron White with White Light Astrology. Welcome back to your favorite weekly horoscope. What the fuck is going on in the universe for February 3rd through February 10th of 2020? This week we have quite a bit of highlights going on, but we first got to start talking about Mercury entering Pisces. Now, if you haven't already watched it, I just put out my Mercury retrograde video in Pisces for this year. Go ahead and check it out if you haven't already, where I talk all about this Mercury retrograde that's coming up and more about Mercury in Pisces. However, Mercury enters Pisces this week, and we all know how important and how much we rely on our communication, our ideas, our thoughts, all of these Mercury things. And as Mercury goes into Pisces, it's going into its sign of detriment, where there's nothing necessarily or inherently wrong with it. However, communication can get a little bit Piscean, or I don't know how to say that. Piscean? I don't know. But it can get a little bit murky. It can get a little bit confusing. Mercury really likes to speak through images and likes to be more adept to how it talks. It's not necessarily clear and concise like Mercury and Virgo. Mercury and Pisces can kind of contort things with how you communicate, with how you project your ideas. And we'll talk more about that this week. However, right after Mercury enters Pisces, the other highlight we have going on is Venus sextiling Saturn. I think that this is going to be really constructive with this whole Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter stuff that's kind of going on, and Venus being in Pisces is kind of making this a little bit fun. So I think this is going to bring a little bit of lightheartedness to the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. But then we have Venus entering Aries, and ain't that gonna be exciting? That's another highlight we got going on this week. We'll talk more about that as we go in, but we also wrap this whole week up with this weekend with the full moon in Leo. Now, as you guys can probably tell, that's a lot of bit of fire energy comparative to what we've been experiencing. I mean, with Mars in Sagittarius now, this full moon in Leo, Venus in Aries, there's a lot of excitement that kind of comes at the end of this week. So I want to kind of jump into the horoscope with just basically kind of saying this week might be really confusing with Mercury in Pisces and kind of being in that shadow phase. However, with all of this fire energy we've got going on this week, I think this is going to be an exciting week to, start new things, do something creative, adventurous, and all that stuff. So let's go ahead and jump into the horoscope. So as we go into Monday on February 3rd, we're going to be having the moon enter Gemini, where our emotions, the way that we're kind of reflecting from our environment and just how we're feeling at the moment is going to be brought through the lens of Gemini. So we're talking about, feeling a little bit more expressive, being able to communicate how we feel a little bit better. Also kind of, rationaling our, thoughts and our emotions, kind of like blending the two together. And it can be a little bit easier to speak from the mind, a little bit harder to speak from the heart with the moon transiting Gemini, but this is also going to be a really good time to just think about stuff, in my opinion. Also communication is going to be a little bit more important during these days, especially while the moon's in Gemini. But I bring this up a little bit more because as Mercury enters Pisces on Monday and goes into its detriment, this communication might be a little bit more difficult. It might be a little bit more easy to interpret and harder to be defined and clear. And so as Mercury goes into Pisces on Monday, we also have to remember Mercury's in its shadow. So from this point, well, technically from February 2nd on Sunday, from that point, we're going to be seeing things occur during this time that we're eventually going to be coming back to when Mercury retrogrades. And again, this is nothing to worry about, nothing to fear about. You guys should know by now how these Mercury retrogrades go. But I think this one's going to be a little bit interesting because with Mercury in Pisces, it's going to be really easy to kind of be passive about things or let things kind of pass you by, and you may not necessarily pay exactly attention to the things you might need at the moment, but just be a little bit more aware while Mercury's in Pisces. What are you thinking? How are you communicating, and what are you communicating? A lot of times people talk about Mercury in Pisces being about, having vivid dreams and things like that, and I think this is going to be a critical time for that too, because we got to look for communication in ways that we might not expect. So I think that's going to be a pretty important thing to look out for while Mercury is in Pisces. However, also, our second highlight happens on Monday. I had a bubble in my throat, excuse me. On Monday, we also have Venus sextiling Saturn. And Venus is starting to get, wrap up her journey here in Pisces. It's been fun, it's been relaxing, but with Venus making that last sextile to Saturn before she leaves, I think this is going to kind of help alleviate a lot of that Saturn-Pluto stress. I mean, with Jupiter there, it's just been kind of like the thing that's been on our minds, and with Mars eventually coming into Capricorn, there's going to be a lot more energy kind of focused on in this area. And while Venus sextiles Saturn, this is kind of lightening the load. Venus, reaching out for support and friendship to Saturn is kind of like, hey, you know, you can be, you know, serious and kind of get all of these things done that you need to, but use this as a time to be creative about how you do that. Venus in Pisces is like, you know, you're the artist, the world is your canvas, and here's your pen. Draw whatever you want. But then as we go into Tuesday on February 4th, that's when we're going to have the moon make an opposition to Mars and square Neptune. And while Mars is in Sagittarius, it's very easy for us to be kind of like avoidant of things, wanting to go. Mars in Sagittarius, it's hard to sit still in a sense, but it's also kind of like if you don't have a target, you're not, you know, pulling the trigger in a sense. So when you have the moon in Gemini making that opposition to it, the moon in Gemini is kind of like, all right, what's your target? Where are we really going with this? You know, there's all of these different options, there's all these different ideas, and the moon in Gemini is kind of helping you think of all of those things. But Mars in Sagittarius, I mean, you only have one bow and arrow. You only have one arrow on your bow. You can't shoot 5 arrows in 5 different ways. You got to pick a target and go with it. But as the moon is squaring Neptune, you know, I'm not going to sit here and say that like, oh, you know, this is going to help you be clear or anything like that. I just think it's more of like, you know, don't feel so impatient to pull the trigger. You know, wait till you get that clear shot. Wait till you really see what you need to be seeing. Because while Neptune, you know, imagine trying to shoot a bow and arrow in the middle of like a foggy field. Like, it's going to be hard to get that accuracy like pinpointed. So take your time with your shot. Make sure you're like aiming yourself in the right direction that you want to be going in. Then as we get into Wednesday on February 5th, that's when we're going to be having the moon enter Cancer and immediately make a trine to Mercury in Pisces. And we have to remember now the moon's in Cancer right before this full moon in Leo. It's gaining in light, and it's going to be on the north node. It will eventually oppose everything that's going on in Capricorn. But as it first enters, the question kind of becomes, you know, what is of necessity? Where do we need to trust? All of these keywords always try to hit every time I talk about the moon in Cancer. But this time it's a little bit different. With Mercury and Pisces in detriment, like I said earlier, it's going to be easier, you know, look for communication in different ways, nonverbal communications. Like Mercury in Pisces is a mute sign, so, you know, this doesn't have to be so much of, you know, just expressing things through words. This could be body language as well. But as the moon goes through Cancer and makes that trine to Mercury, I think this is going to be a helpful time to kind of express our emotions. And sometimes we can't always find the words for how we feel, but we could find better and more effective ways to express that, like our body language, like, you know, our like through art, through music, through whatever that might be. And so while the moon goes through Cancer, maybe try to take some time to either reflect on, you know, or try to have that conversation with, if it's yourself or with someone else that maybe needs to happen, maybe more in a softer tone. I wouldn't necessarily say like, oh yeah, this is the best time to have a conversation, Mercury's in detriment, but maybe find a creative way to express how you feel. And as the moon's in Cancer, you kind of have to just trust this one. And this is kind of like either a time to really bring people into your shell or to kind of close people off for a minute. And that's up to you to decide, but those are the two avenues you can go down. Then as we go into Thursday on February 6th, that's when the moon is actually going to make an opposition to Jupiter. And this is going to be kind of interesting because now that Jupiter's kind of really starting to get in the middle of Capricorn, it's really starting to feel its place there. The sun is away from it. We're starting to really see Jupiter in Capricorn. While the moon's in Cancer, it's kind of like Jupiter in Capricorn is like scourging like wasteland, trying to find recycled items to use so it can like survive. And that's a very intense analogy. But while the moon in Cancer is making that opposition to Jupiter, I think this is about realizing, like, you know, let's say you go to this wasteland and you actually find a ton of shit. Well, you can't just carry everything back with you. You know, what is of necessity? What's of important? If you're going to, you know, like if you go, like, I don't know about you guys, I was raised on like thrift stores, estate sales, yard sales. And it can get really easy to like see, like go to a yard sale, when you see like a good yard sale and you're like, damn, I can buy like everything right now. And it's just like, you have to learn how to be frugal and you have to learn how to go like, no, maybe I only need to take these things for just what I need. I don't need to go crazy overboard thinking I need this and this and this and that. Maybe take a step back and go, hey, these opportunities here are great and I like them for what they are, but let me just take what I need at the moment. But then we get into Friday on February 7th, and this is leading up to a pretty big weekend. Friday we have a lot going on. First thing we have going on is the moon making an opposition to Saturn, And this is kind of like, you know, going back to the yard sale analogy, like, all right, we bought something at the yard sale, this was cool, but then, you know, that 10, 20 bucks that you spent here at the yard sale while the moon opposes Saturn, it's like, oh, you could have used that 10 or 20 bucks for like gas or something like that. And while the moon makes that opposition to Saturn, it's kind of like, all right, where do we still need to put that cap on things? While Jupiter in Capricorn is like very much like, here's the abundance in ways that you can be like frugal, in ways that you can find opportunities in disadvantageous areas, like meaning like when you go, like same thing, like I don't know if you guys, I mean, you guys are on YouTube, so you guys watch YouTube videos. You should watch Earth Home videos. I don't know if you guys do, or Earthship, my bad, Earthships. So I was watching this video of this Earthship that literally, these guys built a home and they literally didn't even fill up one 55-gallon bag full of trash. They recycled everything from like a construction site that like, you know, no one was using anymore. And I think that's a really good way to look at like Jupiter and Capricorn. Like there's opportunities where you might not originally see them. But having Saturn and Capricorn to kind of like tee it off is like you might not find everything that you actually need there. And you might actually have to, you know, you can't just like you can't always just avoid the problem that you need. You know, a lot of people, when you shop at yard sales, it's easy to be cheap about a lot of things. And it's like, yeah, you can grab this thing, but is it what you need? Is it what you, is it going to serve the purpose that it does? Like, you know, like you can get a used refrigerator, but if it breaks in 2 weeks or whatever, like what was the point of buying a used refrigerator? Go and get the new one. That's kind of like Saturn and Capricorn, is realizing like what actually like needs to be addressed in like a serious way, and where can you kind of get by with scraping your way through stuff. But as the moon does make that But as the moon makes that opposition to Saturn, Venus will then go into Aries and the moon will go into Leo and make a trine right as they, not simultaneously, but within the same day. Venus moves into Aries, moon moves into Leo, they make that trine together. This is really exciting. And the thing is with Venus and Aries is, yes, Venus is going to enter her sign of detriment. However, we're talking about the planet of love, of value, relationships. We're talking about indulging in things. Venus's main like job and duty is to bring things together. And in the sign of Aries, it can be very much wanting to be combative about those things. In Venus and Aries, you can find a little bit more excitement and more value in the actual, you know, the chase, in the thrill of it all. And Venus just loves action and thinks it's sexy in Aries and stuff like that. And while Venus is in Aries, I think this is going to be a more enjoyable time. But for relationships, this is going to be a big time to remember that you can't just, you know, like force love or force your feelings on or anything like that. With Venus in Aries, if you want to maintain those healthy relationships, this might be a good time to not necessarily be so combative about anything or be pushy about anything, but maybe go like, hey, where can I kind of like sit down for a second and kind of be more receptive to energy and not so pushful on energy. That might be a little bit difficult because with Venus and Aries, we're going to really want to go after all of the things that we really like, even if it's not what we should be having. But anyway, as Venus goes into Aries, the moon goes into Leo, and we start having that full moon in Leo start happening. But as the moon goes into Leo, this is again like, this is about looking for confidence, straight up. Like, this moon in, like, we have gone through so much fucking shit. Like, this moon in Leo is straight up about, like, the sun's in Aquarius, we gotta do things differently. We're kind of being, like, the idea of the sun is in its detriment. Like, the sun is literally, like, exiled away from its home, and while the moon is in its home of Leo, this is a time to really find that confidence and to find that strength, that courage, and kind of go like, hey, like, where can I really step up my game and my attitude about myself? Where can I find myself more invigorated? Where can I go, you know, where can you let your light shine, in a sense? And this is the moon. This doesn't have to be on a grand stage or anything like that. You just need to have that moment for yourself. You have to go and check in with yourself and remind yourself, hey, you're great. Hey, you can still go through this. You can go through bad times and still enjoy the good moments while you can. And those good moments will give you the confidence that you'll need to tackle the next bad thing that you've got to go through. But I feel like that's what this full moon's really going to be about, as it trines Venus in Aries. Not to mention, Venus is going to be in Aries conjoining Chiron, and Venus is in its detriment. Venus in Aries can have a lot of self-identity, self-love issues, in the sense of it can be really difficult and make it, like, Venus in Aries can make it very difficult to do that in a more Venusian way of soft and easiness. It can be a little bit more, you know, harsh, or it can cause a little bit more friction. But as Venus is on top of Chiron and this full moon in Leo is happening, like, you know, kind of look at yourself and be like, hey, like, you know, it, like, even though sometimes I think I can't believe it, I actually do love myself. I actually am great. I actually can get over bad times. Good things can happen. XYZ. You guys know the drill already. But that's how we go into Saturday on February 8th with this full moon in Leo. And that's kind of the only thing that's happening on Saturday. However, with this full moon in Leo, again, just feel yourself. What do you need to do to remind yourself that you are great? But as we do go into Sunday on February 9th, that is when we're going to have the moon make that trine to Mars while Mars is in Sagittarius. And I think this excitement, this feeling that we get of, you know, confidence, of courageousness, of, you know, hey, you know, where can we, like, we're the shit, what's next? The moon's going to trine Mars in Sagittarius, and you're going to be like, you know what, like, yeah, like, maybe I will go and do that. Maybe I will go and do this. Maybe I will go explore this area, and fuck it, maybe I will, you know, put all my money down or whatever. So that's exciting. If you got a lot of fire energy like me, maybe be a little bit more temperament about it. It's gonna get really easy to get excited, but also as a fire sign, we haven't had good fire energy like this in a minute, so fuck it, go crazy. I'm giving you guys permission to wild out. Anyway, as we go through the end of Sunday, the moon will eventually enter Virgo, where we start to process and analyze our emotions like no other. And as the moon does go into Virgo, I think this is just about going like, hey, we feel all these great ways. Let's log it down. Let's journal it. Let's remind ourselves that we could feel this way. And also, where can we execute and where can we channel this light and this energy in the best places that are really going to serve us for where we're trying to go? Like, you know, don't have this great moment and then not use it for something, because then it's not necessarily like a waste, but like then you're gonna have to do it again to get that energy to do the other stuff you got to do. And then as we go into Monday next week, what I think is going to be really interesting is the moon is going to be making that opposition to Mercury and then later on Neptune. And this is where things are going to get like a little bit confusing, because the moon's going to be in Virgo, wanting to be, you know, analytical, wanting to process all of this information. And as it makes that opposition to Mercury, Mercury's like, what? Like, I don't get that. Like, I'm not a rocket scientist, bro. Like, relay it to me in English. And that can be kind of frustrating when you can feel like you want to be specific and clear, but when it comes to putting, you know, ink on paper, the words don't really come out. And so as the moon, after the moon leaves Mercury and makes that opposition to Neptune, it might be a little bit overwhelming and confusing in the sense of like, like, why can't I get this, like, these ideas out on here into like the realness? But my challenge for you guys is to not be so concerned on the how and be more concerned about the why. If you have a strong enough why, the how will come to you. You'll figure out how to get these ideas onto ink and paper, whatever that analogy can look like for you, regarding, you know, your guys' own lives. But again, Mercury's in Pisces. Be creative about how you can see this. The messages and the hows and the ways may not be, you know, like, we don't see radio waves. Like, we can't see the radio signals going from one another. Like, that's kind of like Mercury and Pisces. Like, shit's just being, you know, thrown out into the air and kind of landing somewhere else. And you don't have to see that connection to know that it's real. But that's what I got for you guys. We go into next week with Mars entering Capricorn, and we are going to get busy. Like, literally the next month and a half is about being busy as shit. But this is good. We want to be busy. Last year sucked. Let's do something different. Let's do something new. And also next week is the prelude to Mercury retrograding. And I already talked about that again. Make sure you check out that video. But that's really what next week's looking like. And we'll talk about more of that, of course, next week. But thank you guys so much for being here, liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you guys. And I'll be seeing you guys next week.